See you did.
Chicago Bears select Caleb Williams, quarterback, Southern California.
What's up, Bears fans? What a week. The Hail Mary that was not full of grace this past weekend, guys.
The Hail Mary.
The Hail Mary. That was
of grace.
It was something else. That's why I said not so much full of grace, at least not for the Bears this past weekend. So we'll get into it, guys. I mean, it's been beat up like a dead horse by this point, but I feel, obviously we got to talk about it a little bit on this show. We'll recap the last game against Washington and how disappointing that finish was. We'll also go over this game that's coming up here in Arizona. This is a big one coming up this week, and I think it's important that we kind of dig into that and both what we expect this weekend coming up and kind of our preseason prediction on this game, because I think they're going to be a little bit different. And I'll explain why later on. So as Aldo has on the screen here, this is the Willis Twin Towers podcast. You guys can watch us every Friday evening live here at 5 o'clock Central Time. So before we get going here, just a quick reminder, guys, as always, to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're at Barroom Network on YouTube. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts from, whether it be Apple or Spotify or wherever that may be. You can follow us all on X or Twitter. You can follow Aldo, our executive producer, at Barroom Network. You can find me at _Jeff Willis, and you can find Tim at Tim Willis 24. So let's go ahead and dig into this a little bit, Tim. I'll switch it over to you. Just give us your quick thoughts on the last game before we really kind of dig into the different things that led into what we feel like the loss came from.
Well, look, like you said, it's the Hail Mary that was just the icing on the cake to me, and it's just been a whirlwind of a week surrounding this. And honestly, for as bad as the moments were in that game, I believe and I feel that the media and fans have just taken this in a downward spiral that has just gone completely out of control at this point. It's like a tornado, man. Everything just got picked up, swept up, and it just keeps growing and expanding. And like I said, I don't disagree that there's a lot of egregious errors that were made in this game, and coaching, execution, all of the above. But the way that it's been spun out of control, it's insane to me. And it's part of that is just because of the fact that this is Chicago. The Chicago media is just that. They're not fair necessarily to their organizations or their teams. They're all just crazy. Like they want a certain story and a certain narrative, and it typically is derivative in a negative attitude. So it's almost a thing where you have to be perfect. And even then, they're still going to find something. But to get away from that for a second and getting to the game, obviously, offense was putrid for the majority of the game. It wasn't until like the last minute of the third quarter until they actually, started moving the football and scored. But up to that point, there wasn't a lot of it was 3 and out, 4 and out, 5 and out, 3 and out. There was not a lot of ball movement, period. So there weren't a lot of plays. There weren't a lot of, you can say that they didn't run the ball enough, but they didn't have enough plays in general. And I think if we're being fair, I put a lot of that on Caleb. If we're going to be totally honest, he was not having his best game at that point. I think a lot of that was just, the jitters of I'm back home. I'm trying to prove too much to the 140 or 150 of my high school buddies that are at this game. I think the moment may have been, I don't want to say it was too big for him, but he was definitely feeling a little bit more anxious for this game. And you could see it on the field, the throws that he's been making for the last several weeks and the way he has played over the last several weeks, he kind of reverted back to that, weeks 1 through 3, or at least weeks 1 and 2, where he was just kind of all over the place and struggling to find that rhythm in the timing in the passing game and all of the above. So just for starters, that's, the game didn't start off very well. And something does need to be said about this, Jeff. I don't know at this point what they need to do or what they're doing to overcome it, but the slow starts have got to stop. I mean, when is the last time that we saw a Bears offense get off to a hot start? Not this year, certainly. And matter of fact, I believe probably the last time that happened was Washington last year. I mean, they just have not gotten off to a hot start in a football game offensively. And I don't know if that's what it is. I mean, if you are scripting the plays, maybe don't script the plays and just try to find some game flow. If you're not scripting plays, maybe you could script some. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. And they've been pretty adamant, or they've made it known when they've discussed it before, that that's all based on game. They don't necessarily script it, and they don't necessarily not script it. It just depends. And it's not like they say, hey, these are our 20 scripted plays. We're going to throw this out there first, and then we'll adjust from there. That's not how they operate. It just depends. So, like I said, Jeff, the offense clearly needs to have a better start. And in this game, that was kind of the tail. Like, that's where when the defense, they gave up a lot of big chunk yards, especially, early in the game. They really started to settle into the second and third quarter, but early in the first and the second quarter, gave up a lot of chunk plays and let Washington really drive down the field a bit. And Jaden Daniels didn't look too bad doing it. I mean, he looked fairly comfortable. And like I said, they drove the field. But again, the Bears did what the Bears defense has done, and they bent, but they didn't break. They don't give up points. They just gave up the field goals. I mean, to only give up 12 points in 4 quarters of football, really, I mean, until 2 seconds left in the game, up until those final 2 seconds, to only give up 12 points is incredible. And I don't know how far back it goes, but I believe this is what, Jeff, 9 games in a row where they've given up less than 20 points, which is the most in the NFL up to that point. They're only team this season that's not given up 20 offensive points. It's insane. The defense is off to an incredible start, and it's too bad that we couldn't win this game for them. But I will say this, Jeff, before I send it back over to you. They're 4-3, guys. It's still a winning record. They've still won 4 out of 7 games with a rookie quarterback in a brand new offense. I understand the scheme is similar. It's basically the same scheme, but it's still different. And we've talked about this before. It's still a new offensive coordinator. He's going to have He's going to have his own nuances. It's different, and they're still 4-3, and they should be and could be, honestly. Really, they could be 7-0 this year, but honestly, I believe they should be 6-1 right now. That's just the way I believe it should be, with Houston being the one game that they probably should have lost, even though they had a chance to win that one as well. So, that's not a bad thing. I understand we'd like to be 5-2 or 6-1 right now, but in reality, we still have a plus 500 record. It's going to depend how we finish out this season, and we are seeing growth still. Like I said, the game didn't end well, but Caleb Williams is showing for the first time in a very long time that we have a quarterback that steps up in the big moments of games and can actually lead you to win a game, which is something that we haven't seen from the quarterback position from a Chicago Bear all the way back to Jim McMahon. So to me, we are trending in the right direction, and we have some things we need to talk about with this game too that are egregious, but I wanted to get it out there first, Jeff, that I think the overreaction has got to settle down, and people need to absolutely pump the brakes where we're at right now.
Yeah. So for the most part, I do agree with you. I think it is very clear and obvious that there have been some egregious coaching mistakes,
Absolutely.
both in this game and in other games before. And I'll get to that in a minute. But I agree with you. I mean, they're 4-3 right now. They could easily be 6-1, and we can't overlook the fact that the defense has played as well as they have, especially considering the fact in this last game there were a few drives where Washington basically drove all the way down the field, and the defense still tightened up and held them to 3 in situations where most defenses would have given up a touchdown there. So holding them to 12 points throughout the entirety of game outside of that Hail Mary play is very impressive against one of the higher powered offenses in the league. So that's a big deal. The defense is keeping them in games. I'm at the point now where after the first 7 weeks, I think it's pretty safe to say that the Bears, you don't just speculate this anymore. They are an elite defense. They are one of the top defenses in the entire league. And the fact that they've been able to hold teams the way they have to give their offense a chance and to give their team a chance to win football games cannot be overstated and cannot be overlooked. Part of that is the talent that's on the roster, but we can't lie and say that part of that is not the development and the coaching. Okay. Part of that is how well the coaches have done with the defense. Now,
before I just want to cut you off really quick, Jeff, because I think it's been shown the development of this coaching staff. You have multiple undrafted free agents in your secondary that can come in there and step in for these injured starters, and you don't have a huge drop off. That's coaching. That goes directly to the coaching staff. I you know what I'm saying? And I totally agree with you, Jeff. I just wanted to point that out really quick.
And Maddie makes a good point here. He says he sounds like a broken record by saying this, that yes, coaching has been subpar, but the O-line is an obvious flaw. Fix that and you fix a lot of things. I tend to agree with you, Maddie. The offensive line played like dog shit this week. I mean, there's no other way to put it. On Sunday, they did not look good. Late as they got further along in the game and they had those better drives at the end, they did look better. But early on, Washington's pass rush was clearly getting to them. They are still struggling to pick up stunts, especially from linebackers. They're having a very, very difficult time protecting Caleb to get the passing game going. It's a problem. We can sit here and talk about the Hail Mary till we're blue in the face. We can talk about the play before the Hail Mary where they gave up 12 yards and they just let them have it to allow that Hail Mary to have an opportunity. We can talk about the 2 game-winning drives that they put together and how good that looked. But at the end of the day, if you open up your perspective and you look at the entirety of the game, and coaches and every sport will tell you this, and it's not just coaches, it's people who are involved in the moment too. You can't sit here and say that one play defined the entirety of the game. Now, if that play is different, the outcome is different, sure. But if you look back and you say, did we play well enough in this game to win? I would have told you right now, the Bears did not deserve to win that football game. They did not deserve to win that game. They got outplayed the entire day, the entire night, the entire day until those last couple drives. They were outplayed. Now, defensively, they gave themselves a chance, which, I mean, you can't, like I said earlier, you can't overlook that. But the offensive shortcoming in that football game, they never got going until the end of the game, and it did not give them an opportunity to win that football game until the very end. So you have to play better football for 4 quarters if you want to have a chance to win games, okay? And you can sit, again, like I said, you can sit here and harp about the last couple plays of the game and how they turned out and how it caused the loss. But at the end of the day, the entire game and the way the entire game was played is what caused that loss, in my opinion. And in almost every game, every situation, you have to play better throughout. But the critical part of this is the fact that they were in the game and they did have a chance to win the game, and they bungled that so badly. That's a huge thorn in the side, and that's why it's so painful right now sitting here talking about it, because they did have a chance and they did blow it. So it hurts. It really does. But again, to go back to Maddie's point, if the offensive line plays better, if Caleb makes some of those throws that he missed on, and I agree with you, Tim, he looked jittery in this game. Mm-hmm. Early in this, before the season started on Hard Knocks, he was talking about how he doesn't get nervous. If he can tell himself that all he wants, if that's what helps him sleep at night, or if it makes him feel better, if he's trying to make himself more confident in that regard, whatever it may be. But the fact of the matter is there have been multiple situations, multiple games this season where he's shown that there was some nervousness there, or jitters, or whatever the hell you want to call it. He was not as locked in as you would want to see him locked in as far as play is concerned. He missed some throws in the game against Washington, and he looked like he was nervous about being back home. he looked like there was some jitters there, obviously, because like I just said, there were several missed throws that we just got to be able to make. There was an airmail throw on the right sideline that, hell, I mean, there's part of me that thinks I could have made that damn throw. Obviously, I'm joking because I can't, but he missed it so badly that it's like, I can't. How do you miss it like that? How are you so off on that throw? And again, I just think it's jitters. He's not setting himself to make the throws that he needs to make in these situations, because I think he's getting a little bit in his own head at times.
Well, and I think part of that too, Jeff, could be the fact that, that pressure from the defense and his O-line getting pushed back, and regardless of whether or not they do it on every specific play or not, he feels that because, oh shoot, my line's not going to protect here, I need to get rid of this ball, and then he just sees it and throws and doesn't play in his feet and doesn't necessarily set, regardless if there's pressure or not. So part of that could just be the fact that he's so used to it that now he feels like it's going to happen anyway. But I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, it's tough because, like I said, that you see him doing these things in the last few weeks where you're like, man, he's starting to come along. It's starting to click for him, and we're starting to roll here offensively a little bit. Then they have the bye week, and they come out like they were on a bye. Like they came out slow and they came out sluggish. And there's a lot of people who you can look at this one of two ways. A lot of people will say, well, you had a bye week, you had this chance to prepare, they should have come out ready to rock and roll. But then there will be other people who will look at it and say, well, it's a bye week. They had the week off. They got out of the routine, so they started off slow. They kind of was expected from that. To me, I don't know. I have a hard time with it because sure, I can see, getting thrown out of your rhythm, maybe having that affect you a little bit, but you absolutely do have to come out ready to go, ready to play out of a bye week, especially considering the fact that, in my opinion, that game was such a big one for them. That's another team that's probably going to make the playoffs at this point. You had a chance to beat a potential playoff team on the road, mind you, and it's just a huge opportunity for you to shift the momentum, or to keep the momentum going, rather, in your favor, to play better and to give yourself a chance later on in the season to get into the playoffs. Now that it's still not dead now. They can still make it. They got to play better. They got a gauntlet coming up here. 6 of their last 8 games being in the division. That's going to be tough sledding there. But there's a lot of good points that you guys are making in this chat here about certain things. And it's like I said earlier, the Bears did not deserve to win that football game, in my opinion. When you look at the whole entirety of the game and the way they played, I don't feel like they deserved to win. Now, however, again, like I said, they had a chance at the end, and that's what kills us so much right now. That's the part that's really hurting everybody, is the fact that they did have a chance at the end. They took the lead. You're elated all of a sudden because, man, we're gonna get this win. It feels great, and then bam, just like that, it's over, and they blow it on one play. And it's like a dagger to the heart. I've seen some of you guys are talking about comparing it to the double doink game in 2018, the playoff game. And there's been several people who have compared it to that. I'm going to be honest with you guys. This one was more painful to me and more deflating to me than that one was, even, because that game, we needed that field goal just to tie it. Okay. That would have just taken the game to overtime. This one, we had the game in the bag. It was won. The game was won, and they lost it on a Hail Mary play. Now, and again, another thing I want to mention about that other game in 2018 is, in my honest opinion, I did not see that team as a Super Bowl caliber team. The defense was good enough, but the offense wasn't there yet, in my opinion. So I didn't have huge expectations for that team to move on and win a Super Bowl. I would have been just happy with that first playoff win. This team's, I don't see them as a Super Bowl caliber team either, but this was a huge game for them to give themselves an opportunity to make a playoff push. It would have helped their record. You're 4-3 and 5-2. It doesn't sound like that big of a difference, but it can be. And as Maddie says, if this loss lingers, it's even more of a problem. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to come out against Arizona with a point to prove. At least they should, I hope. Because
if it ain't the team, it better be Tyreek Stevenson out there with a point to prove, assuming he plays.
I'm gonna be interested to see whether he plays or not. There's an argument to be made whether or not he should be benched. There's some people who are very set in stone that you can't bench him because there's some people who will say that that's like grade school kind of shit. Like you don't need to teach him a lesson like that. The guy needs to play because he's one of your better players. But in my opinion, I don't look at it like you're teaching him a lesson. I look at it like,
setting a standard.
This is your punishment, more or less, not teaching you a lesson. It's like, look, you have seen what this did to your team. You don't deserve to play in this game. Now, there's another part of me, though, obviously, that looks at it like, well, we do need this guy. He's a big part of this team. He's a very good player, and you want him to play, and you want to see how he responds to that last game. So I don't have really an opinion on whether they should bench him or not. I wouldn't be surprised either way with what they do. But to me, it's all about how he responds. It's all about how he ends up responding to the whole thing, because that was just a tough thing to witness. It was a tough thing to deal with in the aftermath. And it's like Stevenson's already had some issues with some shit this year, in my opinion. How many times he stuck his finger in a guy's face in the game?
That's at least twice now in a game. That's at least twice.
More than twice. It's happened 3 or 4 times this year.
Well, already. I'm just saying that's twice that he's been penalized for it. And one time the opposing player got penalized when he's the one that started it.
So all I'm saying is, you look at this. If you're Tyreek Stevenson, you better be on your mother effing best behavior. I almost said it. You better be on your best behavior for the rest of this season, the rest of your career. You don't do none of that shit no more. You just go out there and you play ball. Now, I get that that's part of his passion and part of the way he ramps himself up and gets amped up for the game, is by being a little bit
eccentric, maybe.
He's just the kind of guy he's going to talk some shit. And that's all well and good. But number one, you better back it up. And number two, you better not cost your team with it. That's the biggest thing. You cost your team with it, it's going to be a problem. So, this is, again, we have to get over some of these issues. Now, there's some coaching shit here. And it's been beat to it. There's been a lot of people who have been talking about this. It's kind of been beat like a dead horse at this point. But I think it's important to mention that, look, as much as the coaching staff has done well, the way they've developed the defense, the way that they've gotten the players to play for them, they do play very hard for them. It's obvious that they do. Look at the way they're running around. Look at the way they rally to the football. That's coaching. Not every team is doing that. So you got to give them some credit for that. You have to give them some credit for the way they've developed their players, as I said before. You got to give them some credit for the way the defense has played, because they've been very, very good. On the offensive side of the ball, outside of that, and we'll get to this in a second here, that awful play call to try to hand the ball off to Doug Kramer. Outside of that, I felt like Waldron called a pretty damn good game. It wasn't all so much his play calling. They did not play well.
This is the game that they did not execute, where you can say the execution was poor.
And look, I agree with what Cole, if you guys don't watch CHGO, has his own podcast on there. He calls the 85, and he was talking about it on his podcast. He was talking about it in the press conference beforehand. He just felt like the offense did not, as far as the players were concerned, they didn't play well. And I would tend to agree that when I was watching, they just weren't playing well. The offense was not playing well. The one thing that was working and has been working as of late, and I would like to see them lean into a little bit more, is the run game. DeAndre Swift is playing lights out lately. I mean, lights out. They have got to continue to feed him the football, and they've got to do it. In my opinion, they've got pretty good balance between run and pass right now. If it's me, and with the way that, especially with the way the offensive line is protecting and with the injuries you have right now, I'd be really leaning into running the football more. Maybe a little bit more than you're throwing the ball. I mean, maybe get a little away from that balance and start to lean a little bit more run heavy to both take some pressure off your quarterback and to take some pressure off your offensive line. So, and again, how much success are they having with it? So keep that going. Keep running the football some more. Now, that being said, we've been talking to you guys about this for several weeks now. I was on here a month ago when Tim was out, bitching to you guys about that stupid ass speed option against Indianapolis and how much I hated that freaking play call. Now, Waldron redeemed himself for the next several weeks after that with the Kramer package and how they were running behind him and how they were pounding the football and playing smash mouth. And I told you guys, there are times where you got to stop being so cute and just go play football. Show them what you're doing and just go beat them with it. Go pound the football and play ball, okay? And they were doing that. They've been doing that for several weeks now, and it's been working. every single time. Every time they've run that package with Kramer at fullback and they've handed it off to a back, it has had success. They either picked up the first down or scored the touchdown in those short yardage situations. So what does he do with the game on the line when they're down by a score? Actually, they were down by 2 scores, really. What does he do? He runs that stupid handoff to Doug Kramer there, who's not a fullback, who has probably never handled the ball, I should say, in his entire career, going back to when he was young, because he's probably always been a big kid. So I would imagine he's probably always played in the trenches. I could be wrong about that, but I'm going to venture to say he's probably never been much of a ball handler. So in that situation, in that moment, when you need points and you know it has worked every effing time to that point, why on earth are we getting away from handing the ball off to a running back in that package? It makes no freaking sense to me. That is the thing. Another thing that pissed me off more than anything in that football game. That's a big coaching blunder right there. Now, again, he called a pretty good game outside of that, and he's called some pretty good games in the last few weeks. But that shit right there is like something that absolutely cannot ever happen in a football game. You can't be doing that shit. And you can look back and say, yeah, we probably shouldn't have done that, which he didn't do, by the way. He basically just doubled down on it in his press conference, say, well, in that moment, I probably still would do the same thing, even in hindsight. Now,
but that context is taken out of context too, because that's not exactly what he said.
Look, I was just going to say it was taken a little out of context because he was asked about if he could go back and do it again, and his words were in that moment. So the way, to me, I kind of looked at it like he was answering, if we just ignore hindsight and we ignore where we're at right now, we ignore the fact that it failed. If you could go back in that moment, in that very moment, you're standing in that particular instance, and nothing else that has happened since is in your mind and has actually happened yet. I think he was basically saying in that moment, he still would have done the same thing, not knowing the outcome of it. And that's fine. I still don't like it. But at the end of the day, again, like I told you guys, it's like, why are we doing that shit when it has worked running with the back behind us every single time? It has had success. Why are you getting away from that? That's what I was telling you guys weeks ago. If you get in a situation where you run that play, okay, you get in that package, you run the football with the back and you lose yardage or you don't pick it up, it's unsuccessful, I can live with that. Fine. Okay. It sucks. We should have scored there. And another thing too is it was first down. It was first freaking down. So it's like, I can understand if you don't get it, but why?
Well, yeah, that's where the argument can be made too, because if you don't get it, now you got 3 more plays if you need them where you can run Roshan.
But guess what happened? You fumbled the ball and now you don't get shit. So why not run it with the back on first down? And then if you don't get it, maybe you try to get cute later on third down or fourth down because it hasn't worked twice. But still, I wouldn't do it then either. My whole point is you have had success with this play every freaking time just by handing the ball off to the back. Why would you get away from that to run some cute horse shit that did not work? And in hindsight, it looks even freaking dumber. So it's mind-boggling to me why we do that stuff. And I don't know why coaches do this stuff in general, because Waldron is not the only coach who's ever done some stupid shit like that as far as a cutesy play call. We've seen it before with Matt Nagy several times and other coaches. So Trestman was another one like that. I don't get it. These coaches, it's almost like they think they're smarter than everybody. They're trying to outsmart the people on the other side of the football from, but it's like, what is there to outsmart? They still got to hit and tackle the guy. And what they do, they just made it easier by knocking the ball out of his hands. So I don't get it. I don't understand that. And that one was probably more painful to me than even, well, I shouldn't say that because the Hail Mary was rough. That was pretty damn deflating. But that play call was so bad and in such a crucial moment, I just will never understand why they would do something so stupid like that. So there's actually a clip from that press conference. I was going to say there's actually a clip we have from the press conference with Waldron talking about that Kramer handoff. And what we were just talking about with how we kind of interpreted that our way. So we're going to show it to you guys and let you have a chance to interpret it how you choose to. But in any case, I don't understand it. I just don't.
Jane, the criticism of the Kramer call, whether it worked or not, was that it was too critical of a situation to give the ball to a center who's never had a carry in an NFL game or probably a college game for that matter. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I felt confident in the moment in that call, and it didn't work out. And some of the calls, when the calls don't work out, there's going to be the criticism. I'll always look inwardly first, and then move on to the next one. And we're on to Arizona with that.
But it wasn't just a matter of whether it worked or not. It's that there was the theory is that there was a higher risk giving it of the ball to a guy who's never been in that situation in a real game. Is that a valid criticism?
I think there's always valid criticism when things don't work out. And like I said, we'll work inwardly. We'll wrap our arms around each other and work to look forward and execute better and call better plays the next situation that arises in.
Would you do it again if you had to do it? If you had to do it all over again?
In that moment, yeah, I was confident. We had trust in it, and looking back at it, all the things that go into any call throughout the course of the game, whether it's early calls in the game that lead to stuff not working out, or calls in the middle, calls at the end, critical calls, always assess those and go forward.
Yeah, so like you were saying, Jeff, he's not saying if it was in hindsight, of course he's not going to make that call. And he basically said that because he said we would change our call in the future. If it didn't work here, how would we respond in the future and call something different? But what he was saying is, back in the moment, I would have called the same thing because that was what was on my mind at the time. So, that I believe that has been interpreted poorly. I don't believe he was doubling down saying, oh, if I had the chance again, I'd certainly do it again. I don't think that's what he was saying.
Real quick, I want to mention something here because King Book World makes an excellent point here, and I kind of want to divulge in this a little bit deeper before you go on. He says that they have an unstoppable play and choose to do otherwise. That can't happen again. And he's obviously talking about what we were just talking about earlier with the package with Kramer where they're handing the ball off behind him. And the reason I want to bring up that point that King Book of World makes is because look no further than the last couple years with Philly and using the Philly special, okay? How often did they get away from that call and do something else outside of that, where they showed that look and they ran a pass or they ran some different play other than the tush push, okay? Not the Philly special, I'm sorry, the tush push. How many times did they do something outside of that actual play when they got in that formation? They, 99.999% of the time ran that play. And if they did something different, I guarantee you it wasn't when they were down. They knew the play was effective. Nobody could stop it, so they kept doing it. That's my problem with this. The Bears have been running this play out of this formation with Kramer. They've been handing the ball off, and they did it with both backs, mind you. They've done it with Swift and with Roschon, and they both had success with it. Every time they've run the ball with those backs behind Kramer, they've had success. Again, why would you do something different? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And go ahead, Tim. Just wanted to make my case there.
I kind of struggle with this for a couple of different reasons. I will preface it by saying I would never have called that in that situation. Okay. And I think most people would agree that was not a situation to make that call. I think that's been obviously stated by everybody. Here's where I'm thinking this happened. So certainly they worked on it in practice a lot, and they probably didn't see that issue happening, or else they probably would have scrapped that play. If he was fumbling the ball on the snap or fumbling the handoff in practice, they're obviously not going to hand him the ball off. And I promise everybody and guarantee you, they did not run that play without him having received handoffs consistently in practice. Okay. This wasn't something that just happened one time. So that's number one. What I believe, and this is my true belief here, we have now seen this package over the last, this was the third game we've now seen Doug Kramer line up at fullback, right? I believe, personally, the last two times that we saw this, Roschon got the handoff and carried the ball into the end zone. And what have we seen more than anything from Shane Waldron thus far? He will give you a look, and then he will change that same look to have success again. We saw it just 3 games ago, okay, which was, I'm trying to remember now, Carolina. We saw a touchdown play. I'm already forgetting the play in my head now. And then the very next week, they ran that same machete concept, but they threw the ball the opposite side. And they scored again, I can't remember what happened. It was one of them was Cole Kmet, and the other one was to DJ Moore. DJ Moore got the touchdown against, I believe it was Carolina, and then the next week there was a throw to Cole Kmet off the same concept. It was just a different the way he schemed it up was different. And I think it's the same thing here. I think Waldron is just trying to think ahead, and he's shown this same look twice now. And so he was trying to now make Washington believe, okay, this is the look. We've seen this twice now. They're going to hand it off to Roschon, and Kramer's going to be the fullback to block. And so they just were trying to get a different look here. Now, again,
regardless, it's first down.
Again, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just telling you the thought process that I believe is happening on that play. Now, I don't disagree with that play call in another situation. I think that's a good play call because you want to get a different look because you've shown this twice now. Let's give them a different look. Let's make them guess. And I don't think it's too cute, honestly. I don't think that's the word for the play. But in the situation that they were in, you just pound the freaking ball. I mean, it's a yard. It is 1 yard. You just hand it off to Roschon, who has done this multiple weeks in a row now.
I mean, that's what we're saying. But look, it's too cute when you're trying to do this shit with a backup center who has never run the ball before. Okay, he's not a fullback. He's out there lead blocking. You brought him in to lead block because he is a blocker. Okay, he is a big man who is an offensive lineman who is a blocker. You do not bring him in to run the football. The whole point of him being in this package is to block. That's my point. It's stupid. It is absolutely stupid. If you're going to look, if you want to run that play, okay, if you want to use something different, run a different play out of that formation, like for instance, let's say you get DJ Moore on the outside one-on-one. We see Caleb likes to take that throw there on run plays. He'll shoot to DJ Moore on a pass play if he's got one-on-one. If you do that in that situation, I wouldn't hate that as much. Okay, I wouldn't necessarily like it because there's no reason you can't pound the ball for 1 freaking yard, in my opinion. But at the same time, it's like that play call is so totally different from that. It's unreal. And the fact that we're going to that again, when they've never done that in a game, where I've never had success with it in a game, and they've only had success running it with the running backs on that play, why change it? Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to fix something that's not broken. And again, it's these coordinators. I understand. You're trying to be creative. You're trying to do different things. You're trying to get the defense off balance. You're trying to get them to think about different things. But it's like, dude, sometimes there comes a point in time where you don't necessarily have to try to outsmart everybody. It's still a game where what's the old saying? It's not about the X's and O's. It's about the Jimmies and Joes, okay? And again, if you're not letting your Jimmies and Joes make a play at the 1 yard line, it's like, dude, I do not understand that for the life of me. It makes absolutely no sense. You guys probably saw me just get more passionate on this show than I've probably ever been because I will never in my life understand why they do dumb shit like that. Any team, why they do dumb shit like that. So I really don't want to spend any more time on that because we've been beating a dead horse with this. The Hail Mary was awful. The play before it was awful. The coaching decisions on this were awful. The one thing I will say before we move on to the Arizona game and previewing that a little bit is I think we do have to pump the brakes a little bit on this fire Eberflus stuff right now and fire Waldron stuff right now. I understand the reasoning behind it. I understand the rationale behind it. There have been some egregious coaching mistakes, not just this week, but in other weeks. Tim and I were talking about before the show. I don't think Eberflus has a clue how to use timeouts. I think he's always trying – this is my speculation. I think he's always trying to save them for some reason for late game situations. But then when he gets to late game situations, he ain't using them. So that doesn't make sense to me. He doesn't know how to challenge properly. They make, again, the play calling situations and in certain times and certain situations are awful. There are some things, and again, this is the big thing to me is Tim, we were just talking about this earlier before the show started. There have been 4 games now, 4 games where the Bears had wrapped up at the end of the game, should have won the game. There was no reason they should have lost, and they end up finding a way to lose. Teams should be finding a way to win in situations where they're behind. They shouldn't be finding ways to lose when they either have a big lead or they have taken lead with no time left hardly, okay? So that's a big problem, me. And Dennis Moody says situational awareness is Flus's kryptonite. And what's confusing about that to me, Dennis, is that all he talks about throughout the week, and a big point of emphasis for them in practice is situations. situation of football. And I will say, I think they do a pretty good job of preparing themselves for situations like third down, red zone, goal line situation, defensively too, defense in the red zone, situations like that. I feel like they do a pretty good job preparing for that. But when it comes into the moment in these late game situations and they have to have it, they find a way to blow it a lot. And that kind of bothers me. And a lot of those times is because of coaching issues. So I'm with you guys on that part of it. Okay. There have been, these mistakes are adding up and they're getting concerning. But as I said before, we do also have to look at it from the perspective of they have done some good things here. They really have. They've got buy-in. They built a good culture. They've developed the defense, who's very, very strong. And I do think that the players do respect the coaching staff. I really do. But again, if this shit continues like this, where we keep seeing the same thing playing out over and over again, they're not going to last. They're just not going to last over time. I think it's early. Again, like I said, I think we got to kind of pump the brakes a little bit right now with this firing stuff. I can understand why people are saying that, but like I said just now, if it continues like this, if they keep doing the same shit over and over again, where they're making these same mistakes, they're not going to last. They're just not. And it's unfortunate to say that because it's like the same old goddamn carousel over and over again. I shouldn't say that. I apologize for my language here, but it's like we're seeing the same thing over and over again with these decisions. It's like you fire a coach. I'm sorry, you draft a quarterback, then you fire the coach next year. Then the quarterback doesn't play well with the new coaching staff. Then you give that coaching staff their new quarterback, and then you're firing them the next year. It's the same old song and dance. I don't want to see that. I want to see them grow together. So my hope is that they kind of get it turned around with these mistakes and figuring these things out. And there was one point I wanted to make to you guys real quick too, again, before we move on to this game that's coming up. I wrote this down on my phone because I thought it was important. I don't like the lack of accountability with the media, but I will say this. And when I talk about the lack of accountability, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. The coaching staff getting in front of the media and doubling down on their coaching decisions or not taking accountability for the loss and the things that they did wrong and whatnot. But I will say this. This is Eberflus in particular. If he's not standing up and taking accountability for the mistakes in the building, in front of his players, in front of his staff, that's a problem. And that would piss me off. I can't say that he's not doing that because I don't know. I would expect that he is doing that, that he is taking accountability in front of his players and coaches in-house. I don't know that. It's just an assumption of mine. But again, it is a little bothersome that he's not doing that in the media.
I think he has to be doing it in the building and in front of his players, or they wouldn't be playing hard for him like they do. No player is going to take all the blame and all the fault and let them, if the coach is just going to basically put all the blame and fault on them and not take any responsibility. I don't see that being the case at all. There's
been some good things, and the way that the team plays, it kind of shows me the way that the effort that they put forth more often than not. It kind of gives me the idea that they do respect and play hard for their coach because they do believe in him. John says that he should have been fired after the Kansas City game last season when they put up 40 points in the third and 41 points in 3 quarters.
They had no pass rush
after the first drive. I will say this, John, that game was bad. It was really bad. But again, it was only the second year of Flus's regime. The first year was a total tear down of the roster where they were completely gutted. So I don't think you can really hold his first year against him.
Well, it was like the third or fourth game of the season, right? It was like earlier.
It was the third game, and they started off 0-2. So it was really hard for them to get. I mean, it would have been tough for them to win there in the first place, but I felt like they needed to get off to a better start than that. But at the same time, it was only his third game of the season. It was a new roster. They just brought in a bunch of new pieces in the offseason. It was going to take time for them to get acclimated. And the defense showed that. Edmonds and Edwards both started off the season very slow last year. And as it got going, they played great football. So I will say this. I don't know that he should have necessarily been fired after that game. I think that the way that they turned around and played better after that was good. But I'm going to tell you. He says bullshit. But I will tell you this, though, John. If they continue on this track, like I said earlier, where they're continuing to make these same mistakes over and over again, they're not going to last too long. If they're blowing games, later this season and even maybe next year, I mean, if they last into next season doing the same things this year that they're doing now and blowing games, they're not going to make it past next year. But I will say this. If they make the playoffs, there's no way he's gone. If they win 9 games, I tend to doubt he's gone. So
I think if they don't implode, he's still here. As long as they don't implode.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, if they don't have a total and complete, downward spiral, I have a hard time believing that he's going to be gone, because they're going to want to give him an opportunity with his new quarterback, with this team that is actually ready to win ball games now and have a shot at it. But again, this shit can't continue. There's some stuff, and there's been flat out coaching malpractice that cannot continue. And if it does, I mean, there's no way they stick around for all that. And one more thing, because we do have to move on. We don't have a lot of time left. So I noticed in Cole Kmet's, I was talking to you guys earlier about his podcast, 85 on CHGO. He made a point about being process-driven and not emotion-driven. And that's the last thing I want to talk about before we move on a little bit here, is because I do think that that's important. We have a tendency as fans and media too, after games and in big moments like this, where our emotions will get the best of us, okay? And we'll want to do things based on how we feel in that moment. Fire the coaching staff into the sun, or we got to get rid of this player or that player. I understand all that. It's because we're emotionally driven. But if you're process driven and you look at the big picture and see how everything has gone to this point, there are obviously some issues. But if you continue to grow and continue to play, but again, like I said, the defense has been pretty damn good. The offense has shown flashes. If they can piece it all together and play complete games over the stretch of a season, this is a pretty damn good football team. So I want to see them continue on with that, and that would make us less likely to be emotion driven if they're playing better football. So that's just the kind of point I wanted to leave home, to let you guys kind of think about a little bit, because I've been thinking about that too lately today, is the process driven versus emotion, because I also have a tendency to, in the moment, I'll get a little emotional about things, and I want to have rash judgments like this needs to happen or that needs to happen. But I just think it's important to remember that. And Dennis, you make a pretty good point here. We're the only team with a winning record wanting to fire their coach. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I'm sure there's other teams out there and other fans out there who will have the coaches with winning records or have been successful in their past, and they're ready to get rid of them for whatever reason or another. It does happen. Hell, there were Patriots fans that wanted to fire Belichick during the course of their run. So, I mean, it happens. But I see what you're saying. I do tend to agree with you that, we have a winning record. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. But again, these blunders, they're adding up, and they're getting concerning. They're getting real concerning. So I think, and King Booker World thinks that if they don't make the playoffs, he's gone. It's possible. I think, again, it's going to take a total downward spiral. But if they get in, I think there's no way he loses his job. So let's move on, because I want to have some time for you guys' questions at the end too. But let's just do a quick rundown of this game coming up against Arizona. We don't have a ton of time for this. So basically what we're looking at here, guys, in my opinion, the keys to this matchup is, number one, they're going to have to be able to contain Kyler Murray. They're going to have to be able to keep him in the pocket. You let him scramble out and make plays, is going to be a problem. The defense is not real good on Arizona's side of the ball. This is an opportunity for the Bears to get their offense going a little bit. Their pass rush is awful. So if the Bears, it's a good chance for their offensive line to regroup and play better. So especially when they've got backups coming in, most likely. Looks like Larry Borum's going to get the start at left tackle because Braxton is out this weekend. So it's a good chance for the Bears offense to get going. The defense, I totally expect to continue to play good football, and I think that they will limit Arizona's offense. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a very good player. He's only going to continue to get better. He's going to be one of the better receivers in this league for a long time, in my opinion. Dennis says they need to run the ball and protect Caleb. Totally agree. I just said that earlier in the show. They need to run the football more. You got to. It's working. It's been successful. DeAndre Swift has had multiple explosive runs over the last several weeks now. I think he's had one in every game. So since the Indy game. So I want to see them continue to run the football also. Yes, run the ball more and protect your quarterback. And I think this is they have a good opportunity to do that this week, at least better than they have in the last few weeks. So I want to see that. I want to see them protect better. I want to see them move the ball better. I want to see them refreshed. I want to see them come out like they were practicing hard. As Eberflus said, they had an outstanding practice today. I want to see them come out like they were on their details. Like Cole Kmet said in his presser, I feel like there's times where in practice, not everybody is as detailed as they should be. Maybe they're only doing five reps instead of 6 when they're working out, or whatever the case may be. I don't know if that was his exact quote, but that's basically what he was saying. Is there are moments where the cameras aren't necessarily on you, so to speak, the eyes aren't necessarily on you. Are you doing what you need to do in every moment? Are you giving it everything you got? And are you being as disciplined and as on the details as you should be? I expect them to come out this week look like they practiced that way this week. So at least they better after the shit show they put up last week. So I anticipate that. I think that they'll play better. I think I told you guys before the season started, I thought that this looked like a trap game for the Bears going on the road to Arizona, a team that, maybe you would expect to beat early in the season. They've played pretty well lately too, though. But I think I actually, before the season, I said that I thought that they would lose this game. But after that showing they had last week, I don't think there's any way in hell they come out and lose this week. I think it's a must-win game. I think they're going to go out there with something to prove. And I think they're going to go out there and handle business. I don't want to say they're going to blow Arizona out, but we know that, Arizona is a place where a lot of retirees will move to. Chicago area people move to. There's going to be a lot of people who travel for the game. There's going to be a lot of Bears fans in the crowd. So even though it's a road game, they're going to have some support there. I anticipate them playing good football. So is there anything you want to add, Tim, about the game? It's like, before you do that real quick, I want to mention you guys, as I said before, please continue to throw your questions in there for us. We'll have a few minutes here at the end to answer them. But what are you thinking about this game, Tim, before we get to that?
Well, obviously, you're looking at the three big names on offense. You're talking Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., and James Conner. And
He's a
James
problem.
Conner has been a big problem, and he has been for several years in a row now. He's been really, really good in Arizona. I kind of thought he'd fall off a little bit after he left Pittsburgh, but he's actually maybe.
Well, he had a bad year. He had a bad year his last year in Pittsburgh because he got, number one, he had some injury issues.
Yes.
And so Pittsburgh decided to move on. And all he's done since he got to Arizona is just flat out beast mode. I mean, he's been amazing since he got there. So he's a problem. They're going to have to stop him. They're going to have to focus on him in this game.
Yeah, and he's a good receiving option as well out of the backfield. He's a good player, and he's a lot of their offense. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously is the big one, and I would expect he'll see a lot of Jalen Johnson, which should negate a lot of his activity. But one thing I will point out is there still hasn't really been that strong connection between Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. like you would hope for if you're an Arizona Cardinals fan. And that's kind of been a talking point for Cardinals fans and media members is they're still waiting on that connection, that chemistry between the two of them. And it just kind of hasn't been there yet. But to me, I mean, it's only a matter of time. Marvin Harrison is clearly a good player, and he's clearly going to rise quickly in the NFL ranks. He's got the most he's got the most receiving touchdowns by a rookie already, I believe, this season, if I'm not mistaken. And he's clearly a legitimate weapon. One thing I will say is you do have to be concerned about Kyler Murray's legs. There's no question about it. But to me, I'm not scared of Kyler Murray. I don't see enough out of him that makes me afraid for the Bears defense. I'm just not. I'm not worried about him.
His moments is the problem.
He does.
He has
Absolutely has his moments.
Terrorize people.
My thing is, if you are able, and this is a tall task, I'm not going to say it's not, but if you are able to keep him in the pocket, he will struggle. And let's be frank. He's 5'9", 5'10". Guys, I'm 5'8". He ain't that much taller than me. You know, he's a short guy. He doesn't see over the line very well. So if you can keep him in the pocket, you're going to make things difficult for him. So if they're able to set the edge, they should be in good shape. Now, that's, again, like I said, much easier said than done. But I believe that, you know, that's the direction that they're probably looking at in this game. Flus basically said that, or maybe it was Eric Washington. I cannot remember which one said it, but they basically said they wanted to keep Jaden Daniels in the pocket, and he did a great job of getting out too. But to me, that's what you're looking for with Kyler Murray. You got to.
King makes a funny comment here. He says, leave him a copy of COD in the locker room and he'll forget there's a game. He's talking about Call of Duty. For any of you guys who aren't familiar, Kyler Murray has drawn a lot of flack over the course of his career because of how much he plays Call of Duty. There's been a lot of speculation that he spends so much time doing that he's not as focused in on football as he should be. And there's probably some truth to that, but that is pretty damn funny that you say that, Book. That made me laugh. Go ahead, Tim.
No, yeah, that's an issue if that is true. But regardless, that's the thing you're looking at on defense. You're looking at the big one is Budda Baker. He's one of the best free safeties in the NFL, maybe even the best free safety in the NFL. He's their leader out there. As far as the pass rush goes, they don't really have like a dominant guy, and really their defensive line is not all that great. They're a decent collective unit, but they like to blitz a lot. They have good exotic blitzes that they bring to put pressure on quarterbacks. So that is something to be on the lookout for. Is I would say Caleb needs to watch out, because that's probably what they're going to try to do. Is they're probably try to blitz him. So that's what we're looking for in this game, I believe. And Arizona's special teams coordinator actually coached with Richard Hightower. If you guys did not hear that, I believe Richard Hightower worked underneath him.
He did.
So he's a good coach, and as Richard Hightower said, I believe he even said he's an excellent coach. But regardless, that's what we're looking at against the Cardinals, and I 90% certain if I go back and reread or go back and watch the podcast where we did our season predictions, I'm almost positive I predicted the Bears to win this game. I don't think that's changing. One thing I do want to do, though, quickly, Jeff, before we get into questions, I've seen it multiple times in the chat, people asking or commenting of if this is a must-win game. And I'll say this, it is a must-win game, but I don't believe it's a must-win game with the thought process of, if we don't win this game, we have no shot at the playoffs, the division, yada, yada, yada. This is a must-win game, in my opinion, because, for one, you have to get that sour taste of last week out of your mouth. You have to. But number two, the Bears are a better team than the Cardinals. And at some point, you have to start consistently winning the games that you should win.
Well, I don't think that's the problem. I think they do consistently win the games they should. They play well against the teams that are inferior. It's when they go against these teams that are on a relatively level playing field and they find a way to blow it. And that's the part that's concerning. I mean, I think
that goes both ways. I think they've blown games that they should win too. I think they've done that as well. They should have beat Denver last year, a game they definitely should have won, and they were the better team, and they blew that one. I think it's just a matter of, at some point, you have to start win. It's no longer you win the games you should win and you compete in the games that maybe you should win. No, at some point, you got to win the games you should win, and you got to win the games that you shouldn't win. And sometimes you lose every once in a while in between. But if you don't start doing that consistently, you're not going to continue to take the next step. And Torian makes a great point here, and this is what I'm talking about right here. We never rise to the moment in critical games. Now, we're starting to see that offensively from Caleb, which I love. I love to see that. But for whatever reason, we just, a lot of times, cannot close out the big games. And I will say this. This is the starting point of that. Win this game because you should win it, and you got to start taking this to a consistent basis. And the schedule is only going to get tougher from here. So, yes, I believe it's a must-win, not because I think it's going to ruin any chance of the playoffs, which it very well could, but I think it's more of the fact that you should win this game, you got to get past the last game, and the schedule's only getting tougher from here, so you got to take this, let's get a win streak going, or at least get a win here to start building towards that, because it's going to be incredibly imperative as this goes on. You got to start racking some wins together towards the end of the season here, and you got to get yourselves in a good rhythm. But again, this is the 8th game of the season. We're almost halfway through. There's a ton of season to go. So if the Bears do lose this game, I'm praying that they don't, but if they do, guys, they're still 4-4, and there's still 8 games to go. It's not over yet, and I think the panic button needs to stop. Now, if you start stringing some losses together, that's when you can start maybe panicking a little bit. But I don't believe that this is necessarily a must-win for a playoff pitcher, or the fact that if they lose this game, the season is over. I don't think that's true. But I do think it's a must-win for the other reasons that I mentioned. They should win this game.
All right, one more thing, because we got some questions in here I want to address, and we're running out of time. So there's just one thing I want to, and I don't want to harp on it too much because we just dug into it so much. But Dennis makes a point here that I want to read off for you guys because I think it's pretty interesting. He says that everyone's problem with last week is they contained Jaden and kept them from scoring touchdowns, and all they've been saying is how they destroyed us. He's talking about media, obviously. So. And he says, no, they didn't. They won because of complete coaching failure. Now, I'll say this, Dennis. I agree with about 80% of what you just said. I don't think that Jaden had a great game, as everybody's saying. I don't think that it's necessarily because Washington thoroughly outplayed us offensively from their side of the field, okay? Because defensively, our defense played great football. They held them in field goals when they should have been giving up touchdowns in most of those situations. But as I said before, the offense only decided to play about 20% of the football game this week for the Bears side of the field. They didn't play for about 80% of that game. And if they're even halfway effective with some of that stuff, if they're even somewhat effective with the first 3 quarters of the football game on offense, you're probably looking at a different outcome. And it probably doesn't even come down to that Hail Mary. But you still have a good point. Those coaching blunders and the Stevenson blunder really, I mean, it caused the loss in the game there because that's the way the game fell. So when those things happen and it costs you the game, it stings. It stings bad. But I will say, like I said a few minutes ago, just now, I do think that a big part of it too is they just didn't play well offensively early in the game, and that kind of shit just can't happen. They got to get that together. They got to get it fixed. So moving on, let's get to some of these questions here because there's a handful of them here. So first one is from Aldo, our producer. If the Cardinals annihilate the Bears on Sunday, how hot does Eberflus seek it? I'm going to tell you what, if they get annihilated, it's going to get hot. King Book World says Sahara hot. So I tend to agree with that. I mean, look, you can say that there's still plenty of season left after next week too, because there is, but it's like if you lose 2 in a row, the way they lost this week, and then if you get blown out in Arizona, that's bad. That's bad. I mean, you got some real shit to think about at that point. The Bears are not going to fire a coach midseason. They just don't do that. But I will agree. If that happens, his seat is getting hot, like real hot from that point on. So if it's not already lukewarm now as it is, it's going to start getting hot. So I don't think that'll happen.
Let's say, thankfully for Flus, I don't think they're going to get blown out of any game this year because the defense just simply isn't going to get lit up like that. It could theoretically happen. Sure, happens to good defenses all the time.
And they need a road win. They've got to get a win on the road.
They do need a road win. Absolutely.
Mentioned earlier, there's only 3 teams in the league that haven't won a road game so far: Bears, Rams, and Jags. So they better get a damn road win here because it's important. They got to start winning football games on the road. You can't be a successful team unless you can do that. So
yeah.
Moving on, next question. Dennis wants to know what is the best offensive line combination to play? Who besides Kyler and Marvin is a threat on offense? And we just had to answer your second question first. Outside of Kyler and Marvin, we talked about it earlier. James Conner, and in my opinion, he's the biggest threat on offense for that team. If you don't stop him, you don't stop them. It all starts with him, in my opinion. You stop James Conner, you give yourself a chance. And that's the one area where the Bears have had some issues defensively is giving up explosive chunk runs. They looked good against it last week. The only explosive play they gave up was that deep pass play down the left. I think it was down the left sideline, and I can't remember who. I think it was McLaurin, but I can't remember for sure who made that play. But it was the only big play the defense gave up all day long. So they didn't give up any of those explosive gash runs that I've been harping on the last few weeks. How I want to see that get cleaned up. So far, it looked pretty good against Washington. So I want to see them continue.
They actually held Robinson in check really well in that game.
They really did. I want to see them do the same thing here with James Conner because he's a problem too. So you hold him in check, you hold them in check, I believe. So, and as far as the best offensive line combination, 2 of your tackles are out this week with Braxton Jones and Amagaji. So Borum is the only real option there at left tackle. I think he slides right in.
He's 100% starting at left tackle.
I don't think you move Pryor over. That doesn't make any sense because now you got to make 2 changes. So I think they leave Pryor where he is and let Borum play left tackle there.
Luce did say that in his press conference today too. Yeah, he did say that they don't want to do 2 moves like that.
And I wouldn't either. I think as far as best O-line combination, I think you're looking at Borum at left tackle. Left guard, Jenkins supposedly should be healthy enough to play. Flus said in his presser today that he looked good and they're hopeful. So I would anticipate he's going to play. So he's obviously part of that best O-line combination. Shelton's not going anywhere. He's still healthy. I don't think Bates is ready to come in yet. And I don't know if you want to make that change quite yet anyways. Give him some time to get healthy and get acclimated to the offense before you make a change like that. Right guard won't change. Matt Pryor and right tackle won't change with Darnell Wright. So that's what I think it's going to look like this weekend. But that remains to be seen. But I think that's the best combination for this week.
Well, I just want to make a couple points to this right quickly here. As far as offensive line combinations go, I think you're kind of strapped. It's going to be Larry Borom at left tackle. You're going to have Jenkins. Tevin Jenkins should play. It sounds like he'll be at left guard. Center is Shelton. Right guard is Pryor. Right guard's Pryor, and then your right tackle is Darnell Wright. But if I had to pick an offensive line combination, obviously you got Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Ryan Bates would be my center choice. And then I think Matt Pryor's done a good job filling in at right guard and then Darnell Wright. But we'll just see what happens with that. I do think Borom is definitely the starter this week. And yeah, Cliff makes a good point here. Trey McBride also is at their tight end is also good. Yes, he's a very good tight end, and he's shown that this year he can make big plays for them. And he's kind of Kyler's. It looks like he's kind of Kyler's go-to target there on the offense. But if we got any other questions, and I do want to make a comment really quick. There's a lot of negative stuff about Larry Borom in here, guys. If we're being totally honest, Larry Borom has actually been a solid backup left tackle in his NFL career. Like he's given you what you need him to do. And if we're being totally honest, I don't really think the drop off between Braxton Jones and Larry Borom is that significant. I mean, it's a drop off, but I don't think it's like so incredibly significant that we should be super concerned about Larry Borom starting in place of Braxton Jones.
Well, I was just going to say, and Bear Ski Film makes a good point here. I was going to say the same thing. As a backup, Borum's fine. If you got to make the occasional start, fine. But he's not a guy that you want in there all the time.
Right.
So it's fine that he start today. I think he'll play okay, but you just got to keep the quarterback upright. That's all I care about. So Maddie wants to know, why is Herbert not gotten any reps? I don't care why. I don't care. Why not try to use him when nothing else is working? And
don't
Tim,
get me started.
I was going to say, Tim is going to be right on your side there with that, Maddie, because he's been talking about this for about 2 months now, why they're not getting him involved more. The one thing you got to remember, too, though, is he's been a healthy scratch the last several weeks. They haven't even had him on the roster in the games to be able to suit up and play. So,
well, this was the first game. This was the first game he didn't play. Travis Homer was healthy. This is the first game that Herbert's been inactive.
Herbert has been I don't know about that.
He was in. He's played teams in Homer's absence. That's been his job.
Well, that's fair. I didn't realize that. I thought he was a healthy scratch for a few weeks now. But in any case, they're not using him. And why has he not gotten more reps? And I talked about this a couple weeks ago personally. I feel like, Maddie, that it's because they're trying to protect him from injury, because I think they want to trade him. I think they're looking to get something out of him because he's not a part of their future plans. I could be wrong about that, but they're not going to re-sign him this offseason. So my guess is they're trying to keep him fresh and healthy for a potential trade scenario. And before I move on to this next question, there was a comment that Aldo just put on the screen here. If you can do that, if you can put that back up, Aldo, I'd appreciate it.
The one that says Tim is right? That's the one you're talking about?
No, it wasn't that one. It was from Swig Betzer. He said, hey, I heard about this network through Sean Higgs. We appreciate you joining us, Swig. We're here every Friday night. So if you like the show, we really appreciate you being here and hope you continue to come on and see us and join in on our conversation here. So thanks for being around. There's one more question here from Dan Bear we got to get to. He wants to know, he says, for real question, the Bears have 3 straight home games after the Cardinals. Will they win 2 of 3 or all 3? Anything less than that is a fireable offense. I think they for sure got to win 2 of these next 3 with Arizona, New England, and then they go to I think it's Green Bay on the road. No, I'm sorry, it's a home game against Green Bay. They have to beat Arizona and New England. You got to win those next 2 games. I don't care.
I disagree. I think you have to beat Green Bay. If you have to take one game out of those 3 that are absolute must-wins, they have got to beat Green Bay, and you got to do it at home. You cannot lose to Green Bay at home. We cannot see that again.
Let me put it this way. If you're just tunneling into these 3 games, right, and you're looking at just Arizona, New England, and Green Bay, and you ignore the rest of the schedule, if they win against Arizona, New England, and lose to Green Bay, I can live with that. If they lose against both Arizona and New England, but Green Bay, I think I can probably live with that too, but we're going to have a rough next couple weeks. There's going to be a lot of people who are wanting to fire the coaching staff for that, but I don't think there's any way they lose to both Arizona and New England. If they do, that's a problem. That's a real problem. So, but I do think you're talking about just the home games. 2 of the next 3 they got. Who's after Green Bay? I missed that on the graphic.
I think it's Detroit or Minnesota. It has to be. It's one of them.
Well, in either case, here we go. Minnesota at home, and then Detroit on the road for Thanksgiving. So I think you have to win at least one of those 3 for sure against Green Bay, Minnesota, and Detroit. And I think you got to win these next 2 games. That's the way I hope this goes.
I think you got to win 2 of them.
And New England, and I want to see them beat one of those 3 teams, if not 2, hopefully 2 of them. I don't see them beating all 3 of them, especially when the Lions on Thanksgiving in Detroit. That's a tough matchup. So I want to see them win at least one of those games, and I want to see them beat Arizona and New England. So that's my thoughts on that. So last question, Bear Ski Film wants to know what's my favorite Led Zeppelin song, since I'm wearing my Zeppelin shirt today. Man, that's tough, Bear. That's tough, Bear Ski. King Bookworld says he likes Kashmir and Stairway Don't Count because they're in a class by themselves. Stairway to Heaven is the greatest song of all time. So, I mean, I tend to agree with you on that.
Good one.
That one is kind of in a league of its own. It's hard not to call that one a favorite. I'll just give you a list of a few of my favorites since it's kind of hard for me to boil it down to one. I love The Ocean. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah, that's one of mine.
There's a song from Led Zeppelin 1. It was actually a remake, and I can't remember who did the original. But there's a song from Led Zeppelin 1 called I Can't Quit You, Baby. Oh, my God. It's a phenomenal song, guys. And their rendition of it is just awesome. So if you're not familiar with that one, it's a great, great song and a great rendition of it that they did there. So those are 2 of my favorites. And there's just a lot of Zeppelin songs that I kind of get into a zone with where like I'll be really into it for a while, more so than some of the other ones. It just depends on my mood for the day, but they have so many great songs, buddy, that it's hard for me to pick one. I love every single one of their albums is fantastic, except for, Led Zeppelin 3 is pretty good too, but I think if there's one album that they have that's not as good as the others, it's 3, but they still had a great song with Immigrant Song on that. So that's my person. I love them all. I love them all, Ski. They're all such great songs. So it's hard for me to pick one, but I'm definitely a big, big fan of all of their stuff.
I actually like Zeppelin. I probably like Zeppelin more and earlier than Jeff did. That was like my favorite band growing up for a long time until I got older. I still love Led Zeppelin. It's still a great band. I don't know. That's a tough one. I am definitely partial to the Immigrant Song. I coach high school wrestling here in Terre Haute. I actually coached at West Vigo High School. And Vikings. They are the Vikings. And so actually what our slogan that we use is Valhalla, I am coming. So that's kind of been our thing. But Jeff, I don't know. I've always had like a soft spot, and I don't know if it's the groove to it and the way John Bonham plays it on the bass, but I love Fool in the Rain. Like that's definitely
that's probably Bonzo's best drum part there.
That might be my favorite. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody was Bonzo's a phenomenal drummer, but like, I don't know if anybody was expecting that kind of genius when he came out with that drum part. That was fantastic. That's a great song.
Mm-hmm. I love that one. Yeah.
I don't dislike that thought at all. There's so many great songs, guys. I don't think you can go wrong with anything Led Zeppelin, really. So
it's true.
But yeah, that just I'll give you guys I gave you a couple of my favorite ones there. But if you guys haven't heard, like I said, if you haven't heard I Can't Quit You, Baby, go check that out. Especially if you're like a jazz and blues fan. That song is amazing. It's a great, great version of that song. So we're out of time here. I really appreciate you guys getting the questions in here that you did. We obviously had a good talk about football, but I always love talking about music and stuff too. So I like that you guys brought up Led Zeppelin today, and we got to talk about that a little bit. So again, guys, we appreciate you being here as always. We had a great show tonight. Before we get out of here, just a quick reminder again, as always, to please like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find us here on YouTube at Barroom Network. We're here, like I said, we're here every Friday, and there's plenty of other shows on the channel. If you guys haven't checked them out yet, please look into that. We have some great content on here. You can follow us all on X or Twitter. You can follow Aldo, our executive producer, at Barroom Network. You can also find me at _Jeff Willis, and you can find Tim at Tim Willis 24. Again, guys, great show tonight. Hopefully we get this win this weekend. And until next time, bear down.
Well, before we go real quick, Jeff, I like this comment here from King Bookrow about starting a band. He'll sing. I'll play the drums. I'll be your secondary singer. You can be lead vocals. I don't care. But I'm down. Let's do it. Let's start a band. Bear down.
Bullshit.
Stop Bears.
The Willis Twin Towers podcast is a Barroom Network production. Jeff and Tim Willis are the co-hosts and co-producers. Aldo Gandia is executive producer. Music is licensed from Pond 5. Any copyrighted material used was done under the Fair Use Doctrine for commentary, criticism, and informative purposes. All of our programming is available in audio-only format by subscribing to the Barroom Network wherever you download podcasts. Videos are archived on YouTube.